today is Monday, September the 19th, and that means we're less than a week away from Arkansas's archery deer season opening up. And so today I've pretty much got all my hunting spots ready to go. I've got my target deer picked out so far. And so today I'm going to take you on the journey as I do just some last minute preparations, fill some feeders, check some cameras, but most importantly, show you the deer that are on the 2022 hit list. So to start off, I am right now at my parents' property. This is a property. It's mostly hardwoods. There's a hardwood creek bottom down there with a creek that it's seasonal, so sometimes water runs through it. And so our main hunting spot there, we have a ground blind that's on the creek bank that looks over the creek into the other side of the hardwoods. There's a lot of hardwoods that connect it, and so this kind of is at the end of a hardwood ridge, you know, where it drops down in this creek bottom. And so the creek kind of goes north to south right here, and there's a ridge that runs east to west that kind of drops off down into this spot. And so we've got a ground blind there. The deer seem to cross naturally up on this ridge pretty well, and so the only thing we can do to pull them down in this little valley is just put out a feeder and put some corn out there, and we do some other stuff, put out some got some nut grub today. We're putting in a little pipe feeder. But deer travel through here pretty good, and this is also a good spot to pick up a random deer that come through. However, we do have a few hit list deer that have been coming through here routinely. You'll see a theme in the names for the hit list deer this year, for the most part, with one exception, and that's the one we'll start with because he is a repeat from last year. He's a buck that we named Rudolph. Actually, my oldest daughter named him Rudolph when we were going up there to hunt him one day. And so he last year was a big 7-pointer. He was fairly consistent, and actually as the season went on longer, he became more consistent, which is normally backwards from how most of these bucks do. And I had a couple of good encounters with him, including one day where I had him at about 25 yards broadside, and I was literally 1 second away from taking a shot at him with my crossbow, and he just jumped off for some reason, and so didn't get a shot at him then. I saw him a few weeks later on a morning hunt and never had him come in close enough for a shot opportunity. And the cool thing about him right now is out of all the deer that are on the hit list, he is the only one that is still in velvet. And from what I can tell from trail camera pictures, the velvet's still hanging on pretty good. And so even though he's not the biggest deer that we have to hunt, it would be cool to target him just for the chance of getting a deer in velvet. Another deer that we have, he's not been very consistent, but he has made a couple of appearances, is a deer that I'm naming Aquaman, just because he's a big buck that's by the creek. He's a big 8-pointer. And he came out here with, I think it was a smaller 10-pointer that has actually showed back up, well, I think last night. But this 8-pointer is just giant frame on him. And like I said, he's only been through a couple of times and only at night. But he's a really cool deer that, you know, these deer out here have a way of wandering through here early on in the season and then disappearing. But then once the rut kicks off, they show back up and come through here still randomly, but on a fairly consistent basis. You know, with the pre-rut, when they're looking for does, we get normally several different days worth of daytime pictures of these bigger bucks around that time. So it's good to know that he's out there, because now that we know he's there, we know there's a good chance that he could show back up. Well, I made it to the second property of the day. And this one is one that's really fun to hunt. It's about 30 acres. It's mostly hardwoods, but it has some big trails and clearings through it that are just really cool to hunt, especially since I've started implementing food plots out here. It's really just helped bring in more deer. And also this property, out of the 3 properties that I hunt, this one has the highest deer density and population on it. And so deer out here seem to be really good about just whatever kind of work I do, they take to it really quickly. So if I put a feeder out here, they're hitting it like that day or that night. If I mow out here, they're out here just like an hour after I leave with the tractor. I put out feed on the ground and they're eating it that afternoon. And so it's just really cool to be able to sit out here and just to see deer. First of all, there is a big 7-pointer that I'm naming Thor, and sticking with that superhero theme. I'm fairly certain I have pictures of him from last year, but he was one of those deer. He was out there fairly consistently early on in the season, and then it just kind of disappeared. But he's back now, fairly consistent. A lot of nighttime activity, but every once in a while in daytime with a cold front. So he'd be a cool one to hunt, even though he's not just super high up on the list. However, a couple weeks ago, there was 2 new 8-pointers that showed up. One of them is obviously a year older than the other one, and he's just a little bit bigger than the younger one. And so I'm naming him the Wasp, another superhero name. But he is showing up at a stand out here that I call Reagan's Clubhouse. It's a spot that I put up with easy access. It's for me and my daughter to hunt out of. And we got a tripod feeder out here and a pipe feeder, and he's been out there hitting the corn pretty heavily since he just randomly showed up. He showed up one day, and he's just been back, every once in a while at night, but almost every day with the younger 8-pointer. And I named him the Wasp because that pipe feeder, I let it sit, all year and didn't put any feed in it. And then I checked it last week. It had a giant red wasp nest in the cap of it. And I threw it down without knowing that there were any wasps in it. And the cap popped off and the wasp nest fell out and wasps started flying everywhere. And I ran for my life and managed, this wasps were flying into my shirt, but I managed to not get stung somehow. No video footage of that, unfortunately for you, but he's been out there at that spot. So I got rid of the wasp, came out an hour later and sprayed them, and put out a new feeder and filled it up with some nut grub. And I haven't checked it yet, so I'll be interested to see if the deer took to it this week, which I'm sure they did, but just to see what kind of activity I had. I got a little bit of work to do since the work I do out here doesn't seem to bother the deer that much. I brought my push mower, and I'm gonna just clear out some of these trails, just get some of the tall grass knocked down. This should be the last time I have to do work like this this season, since it's late summer and most of this stuff's starting to die off. And so I'm gonna mow through these trails, just open them up and get the grass short, mowed almost all the way to the ground. And then I'll go through and put up some feed, check some cameras, check some shooting lanes, and check all my stands and make sure that everything's ready to go for opening day. All right, I've made it to my last property. It is just after noon, and I'm gonna do this little interview in the truck because I don't want to make any noise once I get out there to the spot, so that I don't spook any deer that could be bedded anywhere around there. For this spot, it's funny, I've been hunting here about the longest, and you think you get these deer figured out, but there's been all these changes happening around the property. And to be successful out here, I've just had to adapt to the changes and the conditions and figure out what the deer are doing and what they want to do and what they're willing to do and all that, and just try things out. And so this year so far, I've figured out something that seems to be working, at least to get lots of daytime pictures of these bucks. And this is where my my top hit listers are at. This spot, what I've figured out to do is to get as far away from people as I can. And I've put out mineral licks, I've tried planting food plots, I've hunted some natural food sources, but the best thing that I've had success with this year is just putting up a tripod corn feeder. And I did not think it would work, but it worked really, really, really well. Even now, it's consistently getting some really nice bucks on camera. All right, so the first deer that's on the hit list out here is a pretty big 8-pointer. I'm naming him Hawkeye just because I'm getting pictures of him way up high in a high elevation spot, And just to stick with the superhero theme that I've got for the rest of the deer this year, he's one that there's no way I'd pass him up if I get an opportunity at him. He has been fairly consistent. He's not out there every day, whereas the other ones, I haven't checked it this week, but up till this week, they've been out there almost every day in daylight. And so first one's Hawkeye. The next ones, I'll talk about both of them together because they've been running in a little group. I'm calling them Batman and Robin. Batman is a really tall, I think he's a 10-pointer, and his rack was just really tall, really impressive. Kind of reminded me of, you know, like Gotham City, the tall buildings and stuff like that. And so he's just, for a long time, he was my top target out here until I saw another one. And then Robin is his sidekick. He is a short-tined, wide 8-pointer. He's more than likely, though, going to be a deer that if he gives me a shot opportunity, I'll probably just hold off, waiting to see if one of these other bucks is with him, because every other deer, or every one of the bigger deer out here are bigger than him. And so if I see him, he's rarely alone. Normally, Batman and Robin run together. If Batman shows up, that's a cool looking deer. He's got 1 or 2 points kind of on the inside of his rack on the main beam. Just cool looking deer, really tall, especially you get pictures of them in the right angle and those tines look like they're ridiculously long. But he's just a cool, impressive looking deer. I'm not sure if I had pictures of him last year or not, but he's been super consistent all spring and summer long, and still out there quite a bit. In fact, I've probably got more pictures of him than any other deer out there. And so unless things change, I feel really good about my chances to get him. And so that leads to the last one, number 1 on the hit list this year. Same property, every once in a while running with the same group of bucks. I'm gonna call him, got one more superhero name. He is Dr. Strange. This seems to fit. You look at his rack and think, okay, no, that's the name for him. He is Dr. Strange. I could not tell exactly how many points this deer has. I know he's got a lot. He's impressive. And I think I've got a couple of years worth of pictures of him. I think it's the same deer that was out there last year. He had 14 or 15 points, and it was real consistent until the rut kind of dropped off the radar and didn't start showing up again until, I think, till after he lost his antlers. But he's out there now. He's really impressive, fairly consistent, and quite a bit in daylight as well. He also likes to run around with Batman, but sometimes he'll come out there by himself. So that's the one. He's got the most points, he's got the coolest rack. I do believe I've got some experience with him, and so he would be fun to target. So real quick before I go today, I'll just share kind of my strategy for this first week of hunting. I'm not sure if I'm going to hunt opening day or not, just because it's supposed to be really warm this week, and that's supposed to continue on to Saturday, to opening day. And I for sure am not going to hunt my best spot Saturday, even if I hunt. If I do hunt, it'll be another place where I've got a good chance of seeing deer and getting some in range and possibly a good buck, but where it's also not really going to hurt much if things don't go right. However, on Sunday and Monday and Tuesday and Wednesday of next week, the wind switched to north and then kind of northeast, and that is absolutely perfect for where I'll be hunting these big bucks. And so hopefully not by this weekend, the first part of next week from today, I'll be out getting ready to go get after these big bucks. And so I'm about to get off here now and go put some feed out for them, check some cameras, make sure that everything's ready to go. May do a little bit, climb up in the deer stand and just make sure that I can get in and out of it quietly and that everything's going to work. There's no surprises, but everything should be ready to go. Need some rain to get these food plots growing, but we got the feeders as backups, and right now the feeders are doing everything we hope for. They're bringing the deer in and holding them, and the deer showing up about every day. And so there's nothing else really that needs to happen except opening day. So that'll do it for this week. I'm gonna get off here, get some work done, and just try to stay out of the woods till it's time to go hunt them. It's getting close and I can't wait. And whenever we get out there, you can guarantee that we will bring you along as we have our next Arkansas adventure.